now from Little Rock, Bishop Robert Smith, Word of Outreach Christian Center. Bishop Smith, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Well, Merry Christful Day to you and a Happy New You.
So good to have you with us, Bishop Smith. I want to get to the Chicago shooting the other day. As you know, it's been all over the news. Looking at it on the surface, doesn't look really very good for Chicago police. Young lady, 55 years old, neighbor. There's an altercation upstairs, baseball bat, domestic violence potential going on. They call the police. The father asks her over to watch for the police. She answers the door. She's shot, dead. Police say, "Oh, sorry, didn't mean it." That doesn't really work, Bishop Smith. What's the deal here?
Well, actually, not just the police in Chicago, but police in general have a real serious dilemma. You know, I may have mentioned on the broadcast prior to this one that my daughter, my only biological daughter, was a police officer in the city of Little Rock. Not Little Rock, but Detroit, Michigan. And she was killed in the line of duty.
I'm so sorry.
Chasing a gangbanger.
I'm sorry.
So, I have a particular spot in my heart for not only a loss, but for the police, law enforcement. But profiling, I was on the governor's task force for racial profiling for 2 years here in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. So dealing with the police, the city, the county, the chiefs, just dealing with them all the time, and the community. What's happening with the police today is that they're taking profiling to another level because of the intensity of hostility. Hostility is such today that people who are involved with law enforcement are on edge, and it doesn't take much to trigger their humanity that's at dilemma stage. Mm-hmm. So anything is subject to happen now. What the constituency of the community ought to be doing is re-educating ourselves toward law enforcement. Parents must tell their children, look, there are certain things you can do and certain things you can't do because of the time in which we live. The police need to be reoriented in certain ways concerning profiling. Now, by the way, I made the conclusion after 2 years of research for the governors of the state of Arkansas that racial profiling is inevitable. You can't get away from it. You may as well decide how to do it and how it's supposed to be done the best way, because it's going to be. Can't get away with it. So this woman who opened her door in light of the presuppositions and the dilemma that's in the heart of every policeman now, everybody is vulnerable, the police and the citizenry. Mm-hmm. The best thing to do is be slow to act.
I think you hit it on the head, be slow to act. And there's a couple questions that you got to ask here. By the way, Common Sense News Time, 917 across Virginia with Bishop Robert Smith, Little Rock Word of Outreach Christian Center. Bishop Smith, you got to ask two questions. One, if the police in Chicago answered the door and the young lady, 55, that was shot dead, if she was white, would the same thing have happened? I mean, you have to ask that. I mean, that is a legitimate question. You have to ask that question. If that was a white woman, would they have gunned her down?
The possibilities, if you had to get an answer straight up, the possibilities would be more on the not being shot. But I'm sharing with people, look, I live in the hood right now. The street, we had gang violence in Little Rock that made national news. The Crips, the Bloods, the Posses, the families, every little gang on every other corner was going on. What's happening is, please, and people consider me as African American, black, Negro, colored, whatever the case may be, but I'm in the hood, and I'm a pastor. And I know how people act and behave themselves toward authority. The average young black male do not respect authority of his father, his mother, the police, or the other gang members. So there's a dilemma right there. Mm-hmm. So most likely, this profiling is just out of control. Mm-hmm. If she were white, the likelihood of her not being shot is a given. But the fact is, I don't know where this community was in light of racial mix in Chicago. But there are people who are doing what they've always been doing. It's called white flight. They're getting away from black people and going and establishing other communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I mean, what you said about there's a haste here, people on edge. I mean, some people say the whole world is on edge, but there is an edginess there that I don't really recall. You know, when I grew up, I'm 57, Bishop Smith, and, you know, there's a, I don't know if it's trigger happy, but just on edge. I mean, you look at what happened in Cleveland. I mean, a young 15-year-old shot. He pulled a toy gun. Now, the cop was exonerated. Look, you pull a toy gun, you're going to get shot. I mean, bad thing. Nothing positive is going to happen when a police car pulls up and you pull out a toy pistol, right? Nothing positive is going to come out of that. But having said that, you know, that cop was very quick to act. Not a lot of protocol. He pulled up way too close. If you look at the tape to that young man when this happened in Cleveland, the whole thing took 2 seconds. He shot him dead. You can say that, you know, maybe he could have hesitated. Of course, if he was shot, then you would have said, how come he didn't act earlier, so you can see both sides of it. You know, also now we find out that this cop in Cleveland was fired from Detroit because they didn't think he was stable. And then Cleveland hired him, didn't even check his background. So, you know, if you're in the black community and innocent people are getting shot and this stuff keeps happening, it just keeps happening. Every 2 weeks we get another one of these. Obviously, the tension, I mean, it's going to rise, isn't it?
Oh, it's going to do that. And parents will have to re-educate their children or educate them, period. In other words, you can't act a fool.
Right.
You have in the past, but you can't now. Your life is on the line.
Right.
And I tell the people in my community here, I say, I live where you live, but don't live like you live. And if you want to live, you better find out how I'm living.
Well, I think people have to look, Bishop Smith, you're right. I think everybody has to realize now that things are tense and police are on edge all over. And so white, black, whatever, I think, you know, you have to take a little bit of a different approach than maybe you would have taken in the time past because there's a lot of nasty things happening out there. I don't really know what the answer to this is, but
here's the answer. Here's the answer, John. The scripture talks about circumcision or uncircumcision. That's religiosity and secularism. It says nothing matters but a new creature or a new creation. The only thing that's going to work today is that Christians come to the point of knowing who they really are. I tell you, 90% of all Christians in the United States of America don't know who they are. Mm-hmm. And I'll be 70 years old here coming up. Been in church life most of all my life. Been around the world several times, preaching in countries all over the place.
Right.
And I can say it, 90% of Christians do not know what happened to them when they got born again. So they go right back into the old hostility factor that's in the flesh that was put to death when Christ was crucified on the cross. But most saints don't consider themselves crucified with Christ. They figure Christ was crucified for them, but they're not with him. So the hostility factor is in the flesh of even born-again Christians. The most segregated hour in America is high noon on Sunday because Christians do not know who they are. You know the world don't know who it is.
You got that right. Well, I tell you what, that is going to be the final word and a great word. We want to thank Bishop Robert Smith, Little Rock Word of Outreach Christian Center, for being with us. It's always an honor to have you on, sir. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
God bless.